When the Harper family moved into the old countryside cottage in Yorkshire, it felt like a fresh start. The rent was cheap, the land was quiet, and the nearest neighbor was nearly a mile away. The garden was wild, the trees tall and brooding, and at the very edge of the backyard sat an old, moss-covered stone well, sealed with a heavy wooden lid and rusted iron hinges. Their daughter, Elsie, was a quiet 7-year-old with a vivid imagination. She spent her days playing in the garden, talking to herself, drawing with chalk on the stones, and humming to invisible companions. One afternoon, as her mother, Clara Harper, was hanging laundry, she overheard Elsie whispering near the well. "You can't come out. Mummy says you're not real." Pause. "No, I won't tell them what you said. They'll just make fun again." Clara peeked around the sheets to find Elsie sitting cross-legged beside the sealed well, her head tilted slightly, like she was listening intently to something. When Clara asked who she was talking to, Elsie smiled and said, "My new friend. Her name is Lydia. She lives down there." Clara chuckled at first. Kids and their imaginary friends. But that night, Elsie had a nightmare. She screamed loud enough to wake the whole house, shouting, "She said it's cold. She said it's dark." They found Elsie in bed, crying and shivering, with her fingers clutched so tightly to her blanket that her knuckles were white. When asked what happened, she whispered, "Lydia wants her doll. She lost it when she fell." The next morning, Clara noticed scratches on Elsie's forearms, faint like fingernails. When she asked where they came from, Elsie hesitated and replied, "Lydia gets upset when I don't play." Clara, now uneasy, approached her husband Graham, who was skeptical. He said maybe Elsie scratched herself in her sleep, or maybe it was a cat. But Clara knew they didn't own a cat. That evening, as dusk rolled in and mist crept across the fields, Clara found herself drawn to the old well. She stood there for a long while, staring at the rotting wood, listening. Nothing. But just as she turned to walk back to the house, she heard it. A child's giggle. Not one, two. After the giggling, Clara didn't sleep that night. She sat up in bed listening, half expecting to hear footsteps outside or the sound of a girl's voice again. But the night remained still, save for the occasional creaking of the old cottage's bones. The next morning, Elsie was back by the well before breakfast, whispering and giggling again. Clara watched from the window. She couldn't hear what was being said, but she noticed something off. Elsie was nodding, slowly, as if taking instructions. Later that day, while tidying up Elsie's room, Clara found a drawing under her bed. It was made with crayons on lined paper. A picture of two girls, one clearly meant to be Elsie, the other older, with long black hair and a face with hollow, empty eyes. In the background was the well. But what made Clara drop the paper was the third figure. A man, scribbled in red, standing behind the second girl. He had no face, just a mouth. That evening, Elsie sang while setting the table, a song Clara had never heard before. Down by the well, where secrets keep, she waits in dark and never sleeps. "Where did you learn that?" Clara asked, trying to hide the tremble in her voice. Elsie looked up and said simply, "Lydia sang it. She sings when she's lonely." That night, Clara insisted Graham check the well. He grumbled about how the whole thing was just childish nonsense, but agreed to look. With a flashlight and a crowbar, Graham pried open the sealed lid. The hinges groaned in protest, and the wood splintered under his grip. A foul, wet smell drifted up, like earth and rot and mildew. He shone the light down into the darkness. The walls were slick with moss, and the bottom was too deep to see clearly. Nothing, no movement, no sound, until as he began to pull the lid back over, the light flickered, and for a split second, just a heartbeat, he thought he saw something move. Something pale, probably just water reflecting, he muttered. But as he sealed the well again and turned to leave, he stepped on something soft. Lying near the stones was a small, decayed cloth doll, its button eyes missing and its mouth sewn shut with red thread. They had never seen it before. That night, Elsie had another episode. She woke screaming, but not in fear, in rage. She threw her doll across the room and began clawing at the walls, yelling, "She said you took it from her. She saw you. She wants it back." Clara rushed in, trying to calm her, but Elsie's eyes were wide and unblinking, her voice lower, too low for a child. She collapsed moments later, unconscious. In the morning, Elsie didn't remember anything. Clara couldn't take it anymore. She called the local priest, Father Wren, who had served in the village for decades. When he arrived, he listened quietly as Clara explained everything. Then he asked to speak with Elsie, alone. She sat across from him, swinging her feet, smiling. "Do you know who Lydia is?" "Of course." "And where does she come from?" "She lives in the dark. She used to cry, but not anymore." "Why not?" "Because she has me now." Father Wren left, visibly shaken. He agreed to bless the well. As he began the ritual outside that afternoon, Elsie stood at her window, watching. Then she screamed. A shrill, blood-curdling scream that made birds scatter from the trees. Her body twisted, her hands clenched into claws, and her voice shrieked. "You're making her angry. Stop. She'll hurt you." The blessing was never finished. That night, they found their dog, Hector, lying lifeless beside the well. His neck was broken. On the shed wall nearby, scratched deep into the wood, were the words, "You promised." The discovery sent ripples through the village. The child's remains, though partially decayed, were astonishingly intact. A forensic team confirmed the body belonged to Lydia Croft, who had vanished without a trace in the spring of 1992. The Croft family had long since moved away, except for one person, Thomas Croft, Lydia's uncle. He still lived in a weather-beaten farmhouse on the other side of the valley. In his youth, Thomas had been a strange, secretive man, never married, no close friends, and always wary of children. At the time of Lydia's disappearance, he had been questioned, but no evidence tied him to her vanishing. The case had gone cold. Now, 30 years later, Lydia had finally been found, buried in a well on land he once owned. Constable Bly visited Thomas the next morning. The old man answered the door slowly, his eyes sunken, his hands trembling. When Bly showed him the photo of the remains, Thomas didn't speak. He only said quietly, "She told you where to find her, didn't she?" Bly stared. "Who did?" "The girl. Elsie. Lydia." Thomas sat down heavily, clutching the arm of his worn chair. "She was never meant to stay there that long. I told her I'd come back. I told her I was going to scare her a little, that's all. Just to teach her not to talk to strangers. But she screamed so loud, and then she fell. She wouldn't stop crying, so I sealed it." Bly could barely breathe. "You buried her alive?" No. She was already cold. I swear she was. I checked." He began to weep. "I heard her crying for weeks after, every night, through the walls, in my dreams. And then she stopped. Or maybe I stopped listening. Thomas was arrested. and held for questioning, but no one in the village was surprised. Some even muttered that they'd always known something was wrong with him. They just never had proof. But proof didn't end the haunting. At the Harper house, things grew worse. Elsie began speaking in an older dialect, using phrases no 7-year-old would know. Claptrap, penny dreadful, crikey, you smell like the iron works. Words no one had used for decades. She drew pictures of barns that no longer stood and named villagers long dead. Clara tried taking her away, driving to her sister's house 2 towns over, but as they passed the village sign, Elsie screamed and began to choke. She clawed at her neck, like invisible hands were squeezing it. They turned back. The choking stopped the moment they crossed back into the village. That night, Graham had a nightmare. In it, he stood at the well, and a little girl in soaked clothes whispered, "You can't take her. She's mine now." He woke to find Elsie standing by his bedside, staring at him. "You were talking to Lydia in your sleep," she said. "She wants her dolly back. You took it. She remembers." Meanwhile, back at the station, Thomas Croft refused to speak to anyone else. He demanded to see Elsie. Out of desperation, the authorities allowed him to watch her from a distance, from behind a one-way mirror at the station, where she had been brought for questioning. She sat at the table, swinging her legs, humming. When Thomas laid eyes on her, he turned gray. "That's her," he whispered. "That's Lydia. She's come back." He began to scream, clawing at his own face, shouting, "I buried you. I buried you, and you're still here." That night he was found in his cell, hanging from his bedsheet. His mouth was stuffed with dirt, his hands broken at unnatural angles. The autopsy couldn't explain it. No one could. In the days following Thomas Croft's death, the village settled into an uneasy silence. People avoided the Harper house. Children were told not to speak to Elsie. The church held a mass for Lydia Croft, but Clara and Graham didn't attend. They were too busy watching their daughter, who wasn't quite their daughter anymore. Elsie no longer answered to her name. She referred to herself in the third person. "Elsie likes porridge. Elsie's cold. Elsie wants to go back down." She would sit by the window for hours, staring at the well. Clara tried to block the view with curtains. Elsie tore them down. Graham tried covering the well with fresh stone. The next morning, it was open again. And then came the whispers. First, at night. Then during the day. Voices rising from the well. Not just one. Many. Like echoes, buried deep. "Let her go. She belongs to us now. You promised." Desperate, Clara contacted a psychic medium from London, Edith Vale, an older woman with a quiet voice and a reputation for crossing spirits over. Edith arrived wearing all black, with a silver pendant and eyes that had seen too much. She didn't ask many questions. She just asked to see the well. Clara and Graham watched from the porch as Edith approached it. She placed both hands on the rim, closed her eyes and whispered something into the stones. Then her eyes snapped open. She turned back to them, pale as bone. "She's not in the well anymore. Not her spirit." "Then where is she?" Clara asked, trembling. Edith looked at Elsie, who was sitting on the swing. "She's inside your daughter, and there's more than just her." Edith attempted a cleansing ritual that night, but something went wrong. The candle flames turned blue. The air grew thick and heavy. Elsie began to scream, not in her own voice, but a deep, guttural growl. The table shook. The walls bled water, and somewhere in the darkness, footsteps circled the house, though no one was there. The ritual ended when Elsie collapsed, unconscious. She didn't wake up for 3 days. When she finally did, she whispered, "Lydia says thank you, but she's not going back." That morning, Clara found a new drawing in Elsie's room. It showed the well, again. But this time, there were 2 girls at the bottom. One was Lydia, the other looked exactly like Elsie. Eyes wide, mouth open in a silent scream. Clara dropped the paper in horror. "If Elsie's in the well," she whispered to Graham, "then what's living in her skin?" Weeks passed. The police case closed. No charges, no further evidence, no way to prove possession. Clara and Graham tried to move forward, but Elsie, or whatever she had become, was different. She ate less, spoke less. Her drawings grew darker. One day she brought a dead bird inside and placed it by the fireplace. When asked why, she replied, "Lydia's hungry. She misses the dark." One final night, Graham awoke to find the bed empty. He stumbled downstairs, calling Clara's name, then Elsie's. The front door was wide open. The wind howled through the trees. And there, at the edge of the yard, stood Elsie, looking down into the well. He rushed outside. "Elsie, don't move." But she didn't turn. She whispered something he couldn't hear. As he drew closer, she looked over her shoulder and smiled. Not a child's smile. A knowing, ageless grin. "She's home now," she said. "You can stop worrying. You'll see her again. When it's your turn." She walked back to the house and went to bed, like nothing had happened. Graham stared down into the well, and far below, he thought he saw something float to the surface. A crayon drawing, soaked through. 2 little girls, holding hands, smiling, waiting.